For years, the galaxy saw humans as nothing more than newcomers, late arrivals, who were still trying to understand how the larger universe worked. Other species had been traveling through the stars for thousands of years, forming empires, alliances, and long histories full of wars and peace treaties. Humans, however, had only recently built ships that could cross the endless darkness. Their technology seemed simple, their diplomacy unsure, and their presence almost harmless in the eyes of the older civilizations. Many alien leaders would smile politely when humans entered a room, but they never took them seriously. They thought humans were emotional, unpredictable, too attached to ideals like fairness and justice. They believed humans were fragile beings who would never stand up against stronger species, but humanity was used to being underestimated. Even on their own planet, humans had a long history of being pushed down, doubted, and challenged. Yet every time, they rose. Every time, they surprised, and even though the galaxy did not see it, humans were learning quickly. Their small ships that looked weak on the outside were hiding secrets, built with determination and silence. Things began to change when humans formed alliances with smaller civilizations. These weaker species were often ignored or bullied by larger powers, especially by aggressive groups like the Varkan Dominion. Humanity chose to protect them, offering medical support, trading supplies, and building trust. For the first time, many minor species felt they had a friend. The Galactic Council, the main political force of the universe, noticed this friendship, but didn't think much of it. To them, humans were just doing what humans always did, helping, hoping, and dreaming. The problems began when the Varkan Dominion started pushing into territories under human protection. The Varkans were known for their cruelty and hunger for power. They didn't fear anyone, and they certainly didn't fear humanity. In their eyes, humans looked weak. Their ships were small, their weapons were old, their diplomacy sounded emotional. So the Varkans took advantage of that. They attacked small human colonies, raided supply ships, and harassed medical vessels. They believed humans would complain a little and then back down. At first, humanity did exactly what the galaxy expected. They protested through peaceful channels. They sent messages to the Galactic Council, filed reports, requested support, and tried to resolve the conflict through negotiation. They believed that justice would come if they followed the rules. They believed that the Council would understand the problem and take a stand. But the Council did not want to get involved. They kept calling the situation a local dispute, saying humans should handle it themselves. They acted as if human lives did not matter enough to risk political tension. Every time humans asked for help, the Council responded with cold, distant words. They told humans to stay calm, to be patient, to learn to deal with losses. It was as if the pain of small species didn't matter, as if the galaxy had grown too used to watching the strong crush the weak. Humanity listened. They tried to stay patient, but each new attack hurt more. More families cried. More survivors were rescued from burned homes. More small species begged humanity not to leave them alone. Something began to shift deep inside the human heart. They were peaceful, yes, but they had limits. They could endure suffering, but not forever. Their patience was not endless, it was a thread slowly breaking, and while the galaxy believed humans were weak, humanity was preparing, quietly, carefully, and far from the Council's eyes. Hidden inside deep space, research stations, and underground facilities, the United Earth Fleet had been working on something for years. A secret project called Project Aegis. Very few knew about it, even within human leadership. It was designed for a future no one wanted, a future where humanity would be forced to defend itself against overwhelming power. This project included new kinds of technology, so advanced that no alien sensors had ever detected anything like it. Humans had developed strange gravitational fields, armor made from materials that seemed impossible, and engines that could fold space like a sheet of paper. They did all this quietly, because they knew the galaxy watched them with suspicion. Still, humanity hoped they would never have to use it. They hoped diplomacy would work. They hoped the galaxy would step in before things went too far, but the attacks continued. Peace talks failed. And slowly, humanity's silence turned into something the galaxy did not recognize, something cold, steady, and dangerous. Then came the final attack. A small humanitarian outpost home to doctors, nurses, volunteers, and refugee families was surrounded by Varkan raiders. There was no warning. There was no reason. The Varkans destroyed everything. Ships were burned on landing pads, communications were jammed, and by the time a human rescue team arrived, the outpost was nothing but smoke and ash. Human leaders gathered around the footage. They watched the ruined buildings. They heard the cries of the few survivors. They saw the bodies of people who had only come to help others. Something inside them snapped, not with loud anger, but with quiet certainty. They understood the truth. They had been patient enough. They had tried diplomacy. They had followed every rule, and the galaxy had ignored them. From that moment, humanity stopped speaking. They stopped asking for help. They stopped filing reports. Instead, they pressed a single button, one that activated Project Aegis. Every human commander received the same message: prepare for deployment. Silent mode. No announcements. Human ships that had been hidden for years powered up. Massive engines hummed beneath the darkness of space. Unknown energy signatures pulsed inside their cores. Crews rushed into place, not with anger, but with determination. They were not going to attack anyone. They were going to show the galaxy what humanity truly was, something far stronger, far smarter, and far more patient than anyone had ever imagined. The galaxy did not see it coming. They still believed humans were weak, emotional newcomers. They had no idea what was moving in the shadows. They had no idea what would soon emerge from folded space. They had no idea that humanity had reached its limit, and all of this began with one simple fact. The galaxy pushed humans too far, and humanity never reacted the way anyone expected. The situation grew worse with every passing week, and humanity began to feel the pressure building like a storm waiting to break. The Varkan Dominion had tasted victory once, and now they wanted more. Their attacks were no longer small raids or isolated ambushes. They were organized, brutal, and clearly meant to test how far humans could bend before breaking. They believed that humans would accept anything if it meant avoiding war. They believed humans were too soft, too emotional, too focused on peace. That belief made them bold, and their boldness made them dangerous. The first major attack of this new phase came when a human medical convoy was traveling through a neutral corridor. These ships carried doctors, medicines, food supplies, and children who had been saved from previous Varkan attacks. They were peaceful vessels, with no heavy weapons, no military crew, and no expectation of danger. For decades, even enemies respected medical ships. But the Varkans did not care. They ambushed the convoy with 8 war cruisers, surrounding the slow-moving ships like wolves surrounding a group of injured animals. They didn't ask for surrender. They didn't send a warning. They opened fire. When the surviving humans sent distress signals, the Galactic Council shrugged it off. They called it an unfortunate misunderstanding. They told humanity to remain calm, not realizing that each calm reply from Earth was becoming sharper, colder, thinner, as if the words themselves were fighting to hide the truth, boiling underneath. But the galaxy kept ignoring them. Weeks later, human cargo convoys, the ones responsible for delivering basic supplies to frontier colonies, were targeted. These convoys were essential for survival. They carried water processors, oxygen filters, food generators, anything a new colony needed to grow. The Varkans raided them openly, taking everything and leaving the crew stranded in dead space. Some crews were never heard from again. Others were rescued after days of drifting between the stars with no power, their voices weak from calling for help. Humanity again reported every detail to the Council. They showed evidence. They presented recordings. They begged for intervention because they still believed the galaxy valued peace as much as they did. But every time, the Council responded with the same empty lines. We are monitoring the situation. We cannot take sides in a local dispute. Both parties should seek peaceful communication. It was like speaking to a wall, a cold metal wall that did not care. But the breaking point had not been reached yet. Something inside humanity was still holding on, still hoping someone would listen. Then came the third blow, the one that turned rising tension into something far darker. A small settlement of human families had formed on a peaceful moon. It was a place full of children, farmers, teachers, people who had no connection to military work. They chose that moon because it was outside conflict zones, a quiet, simple home, away from trouble. They believed they were safe. They were wrong. The Varkans, hungry to show dominance, attacked without remorse. They burned homes, destroyed landing pads, and chased families through the forests. The survivors later recalled how the sky turned red, how the ground shook, and how the darkness smelled of smoke and fear. Some families escaped into hidden shelters. Others were captured. Too many never made it out. This time, the protests from Earth were not calm. They were sharp, loud, filled with pain. They demanded justice. They demanded protection. They demanded that the galaxy finally recognize that this was not a dispute, this was cruelty. But the Council did nothing. This was the moment humanity realized the truth. They were alone. Small species across the galaxy watched the situation with fear. They were scared because they knew they could be next. Many had suffered similar attacks in the past, but were too weak to defend themselves or too afraid to speak up. Now, they saw humans, the only species who had ever stood up for them, being pushed down. Hope began turning into dread. But even as the galaxy ignored humanity, something else was happening in secret. Behind the scenes, the United Earth Fleet quietly activated dormant facilities, silent stations, and old communication channels. Engineers who had been waiting for a single coded phrase received it. Prepare for immediate readiness. Weapons that no alien had ever seen were tested in empty sectors of space, away from curious sensors. Pilots who had been training in simulations were called back to command centers. Sleeper ships, long hidden behind debris fields and asteroid belts, awakened like sleeping giants. Still, humanity did not attack. They did not threaten. They did not reveal anything. They continued to talk calmly in public, pretending to remain peaceful. But inside their hearts, and inside their secret bases, they were preparing for something the galaxy could not imagine. The Varkans, blinded by pride, thought the silence meant fear. They thought humans were breaking. They believed that a final blow would force humans to surrender completely. So they made their biggest mistake. They attacked a humanitarian outpost, and outpost meant only for helping refugees. This outpost was a symbol of humanity's kindness. It had doctors from Earth, volunteers from small species, and children who had escaped war. It was a place of healing, not violence. The Varkans destroyed it in one night. The flames from that attack were seen from orbit. The distress signals were filled with screams. The survivors who were later rescued could barely speak. They were covered in ash and grief. And when the recordings reached Earth, something inside the entire human species changed. No one shouted in anger. No one cried publicly. No one demanded justice anymore. They simply became silent. A heavy, cold silence. It was the kind of silence that comes not from weakness, but from a deep, controlled decision. The kind of silence that comes right before something powerful awakens. The kind of silence that scares even the strongest enemies. Human leaders gathered in a dark room, watching the last image from the outpost, a burning building collapsing under falling debris. And after minutes of silent watching, a single command was spoken. Activate Project Aegis. Those 3 words changed everything. Across the galaxy, in secret places no one knew about, the most advanced human war machines began to power up. Energy cores hummed like distant thunder. Armor plates locked into place with a deep vibration. Navigation systems aligned with stars that were still unfamiliar to humanity. Thousands of soldiers, pilots, engineers, and officers stepped into positions with steady, determined faces. Their mission was not revenge, not conquest, not destruction. Their mission was to make the galaxy understand something important. Humanity had tried peace. They had begged for help. They had followed every rule, and all of it had been ignored. Now, the galaxy would see what happened when humanity stopped asking politely and started standing up for themselves. And this time, their silence would be louder than any weapon. The first sign that something unusual was happening came quietly, almost unnoticed. It was a small ripple in space, too smooth, too controlled, too deliberate to be natural. It appeared on scanners across nearby star systems, confusing every technician who saw it. The numbers made no sense. Space shouldn't bend like that without an explosion, without a huge burst of energy, without something violent happening. But this ripple felt calm, steady, almost silent, like a deep breath taken by something enormous. Every alien commander who saw the readings felt a strange chill. They didn't know why, but their instincts whispered that something big was coming. Something different from any fleet they had ever faced. While they tried to understand the strange signature, another phenomenon happened. Sensors began failing. Some screens went dark for seconds. Others showed static. A few displayed impossible shaped circles bending into straight lines, shadows of objects that didn't exist. It was as if space itself was rearranging. Varkan fleets were the first to panic. Their commanders shouted orders, demanding reports, scanning every direction. They thought it was a weapon. They thought it was an invisible enemy ship. They thought it was a trap. But no one could answer them. No one had ever seen anything like this. Then the ripple grew. It stretched across the dark void like a crack in glass, opening slowly, quietly, with a kind of precision that felt unnatural. Entire fleets watched in fear as the distortion widened, pulling in stars and dust and light itself, bending them gently toward a single point. Then the space split. But there was no explosion, no thunder, no flash. Just silence. And through that silent tear came something enormous. A ship, if it could even be called just a ship, merged slowly, as if it had all the time in the universe. It was huge, far bigger than anything the Varkans had ever built, bigger than anything the Council had ever recorded. Its surface was matte black, absorbing all light instead of reflecting it. Every plate of armor looked like it was carved from the void itself, shaped into angles that made eyes hurt if you stared too long. The ship had no windows, no glowing engines, no visible weapons, no banners, no insignias, not even a name. It drifted forward like a silent giant. For a few seconds, the entire battlefield froze. The Varkan Dominion ships floated motionless. Even automated drones paused, as if they sensed something was wrong. The galaxy had seen powerful warships before, but nothing like this. This thing didn't look like a machine. It looked like a warning. And then someone whispered what everyone was thinking. Humanity built that, but they didn't have time to think further. The ship continued moving, slow and calm, like a predator that didn't need to hurry. Then panic erupted. Varkan commanders screamed orders. Thousands of weapons powered up at the same time. Plasma cannons glowed blue. Nuclear missiles locked onto targets. Railguns crackled with electricity. Every ship in the Varkan fleet fired without hesitation. Bright beams of energy cut across space. Explosive missiles streaked towards the black ship. Hundreds of thousands of rounds lit up the darkness with brilliant colors. The entire star system shook from the sheer force of the attack. For a moment, it looked like they had unleashed the greatest storm the galaxy had ever seen. But all that power, all that destruction, all that fire, simply disappeared. The blasts hit a shimmering layer around the human ship, a kind of gravitational shield that bent the attacks away like raindrops sliding off a smooth stone. Missiles curved off course at the last second, spiraling harmlessly into the void. Plasma beams stretched and melted in strange directions, as if space itself refused to let them touch the ship. Every weapon fired by the Varkans struck the shield and vanished. Into silence, not a scratch dot, not a tremble, not even a flicker of damage. The human warship continued to drift forward, slow and steady, as if blind to the storm around it. Inside the Varkan flagships, chaos erupted. Officers shouted, technicians cried. Some ships tried to retreat, others kept firing desperately, even when they saw it was useless. Fear spread like wildfire across every deck. For the first time, the Varkans understood that they were not facing a normal enemy. They were facing something beyond them. And then the human ship responded. But it didn't fire weapons. It didn't release missiles. It didn't even aim. Instead, a deep hum echoed across space. It wasn't sound, couldn't travel in the vacuum. It was a vibration in the fabric of space itself. The hum grew stronger, and light around the ship twisted as if pulled by an invisible force. The warship unleashed a single pulse. A silent wave expanded outward in a perfect sphere of shimmering distortion. It traveled slowly, like a calm ripple on water, touching every ship in the Varkan armada one by one. And the moment the wave touched a ship, it powered down instantly. Weapons died. Engines shut off. Shields collapsed. Lights flickered and went dark. Every Varkan ship drifted helplessly, disabled but perfectly intact. There were no explosions, no deaths, no flames. The pulse had been precise, controlled, designed to disable but not destroy. It was a message, a terrifying, unmistakable message. Humans could have wiped out the entire fleet with one shot, but they chose not to. For the first time in their lives, Varkan soldiers felt true fear, not the fear of dying, but the fear of facing someone who was stronger, faster, smarter and merciful. That mercy was more frightening than any weapon. It meant humans weren't just powerful, they were in control. The battlefield fell silent again. The disabled ships drifted like broken toys, and the human warship floated among them like a ghost, its black hull reflecting nothing, its presence crushing the pride of an entire empire. Across nearby star systems, alien leaders watched the live feed with wide eyes and trembling hands. They understood instantly what had happened. They understood what the Varkans had unleashed. They understood how wrong they had been to ignore humanity's warnings. One look at this single human warship was enough to teach the galaxy a lesson it would remember for generations. Humans were not weak. They were not soft. They were not harmless newcomers. They were a quiet storm. And when pushed too far, that storm awakened with a power the galaxy had never seen. The Varkans realized they had made the biggest mistake in their history, and the galaxy realized it too. The moment the Varkan Dominion realized they had lost control of the situation, everything inside their command centers changed. Officers who had once spoken with pride now whispered in fear. Soldiers who had boasted about conquering weaker species sat frozen in their chairs, staring at the silent human warship drifting among their disabled fleet. No explosion, no battle, no loud victory cry. Just one calm pulse that shut down an entire armada. The Varkans had always respected strength and feared nothing. They believed fear was a weakness. But as they watched their ships float, powerless, their weapons dead, their engines quiet, they felt something they had never experienced before: complete helplessness. The human warship didn't move aggressively. It didn't prepare any attack. It simply watched, silently, calmly. That silence was more terrifying than any weapon ever built. It made the Varkans understand that if humans wanted revenge, they would already be dead. The fact that they were still alive meant something else, something far more serious. Humanity was giving them a choice, and the Varkans knew that was the last chance they would ever have. Within minutes, emergency messages were sent to the Galactic Council. Varkan leaders, who had ignored warnings and laughed at requests for peace, were now begging for a meeting. Their voices trembled as they sent out distress calls, claiming they wanted to negotiate immediately. It was the first time in their history that they had asked for peace before firing a final shot. When the Council received these desperate requests, they panicked as well. They had been watching the entire event unfold through long-range feeds. They saw the human warship appear from folded space. They saw the Varkan fleet firing everything they had, and they saw every attack disappear into the ship's shield like it was nothing. The Council realized they had made a huge mistake. They had ignored humanity too many times. They had dismissed their warnings. They had let the Varkans push them. They had treated humans as if they were too emotional to understand diplomacy, too weak to stand up for themselves, too new to be taken seriously. But now they understood. Humanity was peaceful because they chose to be. Peaceful not because they were weak, and the Council was terrified of what would happen next. They immediately sent a message requesting a private communication with Earth. They expected anger, threats, demands, but when the connection opened, they found the humanrepresentatives.com composed and silent. This silence made everyone even more nervous. It felt like talking to someone who had already made their decision. The Council tried to speak first. "We saw what happened," the Council speaker said. "We understand the situation has escalated." The human representative simply nodded. "We wish to discuss a peaceful resolution," another council member added, trying to sound confident but failing. the human representative finally spoke. Their voice was steady, quiet, and impossible to read. "Peace is all we ever asked for." Those words cut deeper than any accusation. The Varkans sent their own message during the meeting. Their leader, who had once declared that humans were soft prey, now bowed his head and admitted defeat. "We request mercy," he said, voice shaking. "We surrender unconditionally." Everyone waited for humanity's response. The galaxy expected revenge. They expected humans to demand payment, territory, imprisonment, or destruction. Some feared the human warship would wipe out the entire Varkan dominion in a single strike, but humanity shocked them again. "We do not want your planets," the human representative said calmly. "We do not want your resources. We do not want power." The council exchanged confused looks. This was not how powerful species behaved. This was not how conquerors spoke. "What we want," the human representative continued, "is protection for those who cannot protect themselves." The room fell silent. Humanity could have taken everything. They could have asked for dominance. Instead, they asked for safety for the weak. Safety for the small species who had always lived in fear. Safety for the ones who had no voice in the council. The Varkans were stunned. They expected punishment, not mercy. They expected destruction, not fairness. They realized that humans were not like them, not cruel, not greedy, not power-hungry. Humans fought not for conquest, but for justice. The Galactic Council quickly agreed. They had no choice, and honestly, after witnessing the human warship's power, they were relieved that humanity's demands were noble and peaceful. New treaties were written. Old policies were torn apart. New laws guaranteed protection for smaller civilizations. The galaxy began to shift. But there was still one final step. Humanity recalled the warship. Slowly, silently, it turned away from the disabled Varkan fleet. It gave no threatening signal, no sign of victory. It simply drifted back toward the spacefold it had come from. As it passed the battered Varkan ships, every soldier inside felt the same overwhelming emotion, respect, and fear. When the ship folded space again, disappearing without a sound, the galaxy let out a breath it didn't know it was holding. In the following days, Varkan engineers repaired their ships. The humans didn't interfere. They allowed the Varkans to leave safely. It was a gesture that no one expected: mercy after suffering, kindness after cruelty. This shocked the Varkans even more than the warship's power. Back on Earth, there was no celebration, no cheering crowds, no loud victory announcements. Instead, humanity quietly mourned the lives lost in earlier attacks. And then they moved forward with the resolve to make sure it never happened again. They did not act like conquerors returning from war. They acted like guardians who had done what was necessary. Across the galaxy, the reaction was incredible. Species that had always lived in fear saw a ray of hope. They believed that, finally, someone strong cared about them. Some sent messages of gratitude. Others requested alliances. Many simply spread stories about the human warship, the silent giant that ended a war without killing a single soldier. The Varkans withdrew from every stolen territory. They signed every treaty demanded of them. They even sent reparations to small species they had harmed. Not because they suddenly became good, but because they never wanted to face humanity's silent warship again. The Galactic Council, embarrassed by their failure to act earlier, began repairing their relationship with Earth. They held private meetings to truly listen for the first time. Human representatives spoke with calm confidence, earning respect not with threats but with wisdom. Over time, alliances grew stronger. New friendships formed, and humanity became known not as the unpredictable newcomers, but as the protectors of peace. The galaxy had learned a powerful lesson. Strength is not measured by how loud a species shouts, but by how silently it acts when forced to defend what is right. Humanity had shown the galaxy a new kind of power, a power that did not destroy, but guided, a power that did not punish, but corrected, a power that did not dominate, but protected. And all of it began with a single warship drifting through space, calm, silent, unstoppable, showing the universe that humanity's patience had limits, and their strength had no boundaries. In the weeks that followed the encounter, the galaxy felt strangely quiet. It was not the silence of fear alone, though fear still lingered in many hearts. It was the silence of deep reflection, the kind of silence that comes after surviving something powerful, after seeing something that changes understanding forever. Every species, from the smallest colony to the largest empire, found themselves thinking about the same thing: how close they had come to witnessing a disaster of unimaginable scale, and how humanity had stopped at the edge, instead of crossing it. The image of the human warship drifting calmly through the disabled Varkan fleet spread across the galaxy like a legend. No one exaggerated it, because the truth was already unbelievable enough. A single ship had ended a war without firing a single lethal weapon. A single ship had forced an entire empire to surrender. A single ship had made the galaxy face its own mistakes. And the part that shocked everyone most was that humanity did not ask for revenge or reward. They only asked for fairness and protection for the weak. Many species had grown used to thinking of humans as emotional, unpredictable beings. They were known for kindness and passion, for curiosity and eagerness, but never for strategic silence or controlled strength. Yet now the galaxy realized they had misunderstood humans from the beginning. Humans felt deeply, yes, but they also endured deeply. They cared deeply, but they also protected fiercely. And when they reached their limit, they acted with a sharp, focused purpose that could shake worlds. As people talked across different planets, one common question began appearing everywhere. What else had humanity been hiding? Not in a fearful way, but in a respectful, thoughtful way. If one ship like that existed, did more exist? How long had humanity been preparing in secret? And why did they choose to hide their strength until the very last moment? The more species asked these questions, the more they realized the truth. Humans did not want domination or fear. They wanted to be treated as equals. They wanted to protect those who had no defenders. They wanted peace, but peace with meaning. Not peace built on silence and ignored suffering. On Earth, life continued in its usual rhythm. But beneath the surface, everything felt different. People walked with a new confidence. Not arrogance, not pride, just quiet strength. They felt united in a way they hadn't before. Every loss they had suffered, every ignored plea they had sent to the Galactic Council, every cry for help from smaller species, it all felt acknowledged now. The galaxy had finally listened, and humanity felt relieved, not victorious. They had done what they needed to do, and now it was time to heal. Families who had lost loved ones in the Varkan attacks gathered in memorial ceremonies. Candles were lit, names were spoken, and silence was shared. That silence did not feel empty anymore. It felt like a promise, one that humanity would never let something like this happen again. Leaders did not stand on stages making speeches about triumph or power. Instead, they spoke softly about responsibility. The responsibility to stay strong, the responsibility to protect, not to threaten. The responsibility to build a future where no species would be left without help. Across the galaxy, small species who had once lived in fear started to send messages to Earth. Some offered friendship, others offered gratitude, some simply wanted to speak to humans and hear their stories. For them, humanity had become a symbol of hope, proof that the galaxy did not belong only to the powerful or cruel. Even the Varkan Dominion, bruised in spirit, began to change. Not out of kindness, but out of realization. They rebuilt their ships, but not for war. They redesigned their diplomacy wings, reshaped their leadership, and opened dialogues with species they had once threatened. Their people questioned their old beliefs. Many young Varkans looked at humanity's restraint and felt something unfamiliar. They had been raised to admire strength, but this was a new kind of strength, a strength they could not understand before. Years later, when historians looked back at the moment the human warship appeared, they described it as the turning point of the century. It changed the way empires formed alliances. It changed how peace treaties were written. It changed how the council voted on protection laws. And most importantly, it changed how the galaxy understood humanity. There were whispers of Project Aegis, though humanity never publicly confirmed its details. Some said there were 10 ships. Others claimed only one existed, but it was enough. Some believed dozens were hidden in distant star systems, waiting quietly. Humanity never clarified the truth because they didn't need to. The lesson had already been learned. One of the biggest changes happened within the council itself. Human representatives no longer sat quietly in meetings. They spoke with a calm authority that made others listen, not because of fear, but because humanity had earned that respect. When discussions about border disputes or protection agreements began, many species would turn to the humans and ask, "What do you think?" It was a shift no one had predicted years earlier, when humanity was treated as inexperienced newcomers. Back on Earth, scientists and engineers who had worked in secrecy for years could finally step into the sunlight. Their inventions, once hidden in underground labs, were now quietly celebrated, not for their destructive power, but for their brilliance, innovation, and ability to defend without killing. They had changed warfare forever, not by making better weapons, but by creating ways to prevent war itself. As time passed, the story of the silent human warship became something deeper than a military tale. It became a story told to children across different planets. Teachers used it to explain courage, patience, and the importance of standing up at the right time. Parents used it to show that strength does not always mean violence. Leaders used it to remember humility. Even old soldiers used it to explain why wars should be avoided, not chased. For humans, the story was not about power. It was about the cost of ignoring suffering for too long. It was a reminder of what happens when peaceful species are pushed too far. It was a reminder of why they built the warship in the first place, not to scare the galaxy, but to protect their own people when no one else would. In the end, the galaxy understood something important. Humans were not the strongest species biologically, not the oldest, not the wealthiest, not the most advanced in history, but they were adaptable, emotional, determined, and impossible to break. They were a species that learned from pain and grew from challenge. A species that forgave easily but never forgot. A species that held kindness in one hand and strength in the other, and knew exactly when to use each. The aftermath of the Great Confrontation was not chaos or revenge. It was change. Real, lasting change. Because the galaxy had looked at a human warship and realized how much they had underestimated a species that had always fought not for domination, but for dignity. For years afterward, whenever tensions rose between empires, whenever an aggressive fleet tried to intimidate a weaker neighbor, whenever someone thought of starting a conflict, they remembered that silent moment, the quiet giant drifting through space, disabling warships without harming a single life, and they remembered what the galaxy learned that day. Humanity's patience has limits. Their strength does not.